Because I lived my entire childhood on the farm in Salem, Connecticut, I was very naive, trusting, and completely inexperienced in city life. We always had only a few children in the one-room schoolhouse with children of different ages, grades, mentalities, and abilities. Everyone was tolerant of this variety of classmates. Whether or not one graduated from the 8th grade made no difference to his or her being accepted by the other kids in the neighborhood. In fact, some parents kept the children from school all too often, for any reason they chose, but mostly because they needed help on the farm, especially during the spring planting season and or during the autumn harvesting season. Usually, the boys suffered from this condition mostly because they could do the heavy work better than the girls. Hence, very often the girls would graduate ahead of their older brothers. Many of the boys never graduated from grammar school, whereas most of the girls did. In my years in grammar school, all the girls graduated, and many of the boys didn't. They lost too much time, and therefore their studies suffered as a result. Sometimes even the girls were kept home for household troubles, sickness or whatever, you know. Even if the boys had a way of going on to high school, they were not prepared scholastically. Therefore, they stayed on in the farming industry, different phases of the farming industry. Some raised cattle, others chickens. Some did truck farming. Some became good builders of farm equipment or implements. They could make these different things. What they didn't learn in school, they learned from life experiences and needs for these different things. Remember, when I was young, there was very little scientific knowledge applied to farm life, so everything was simple and unassuming. Of course, the more learning you had, the better it was for you to assume a dignified place in the town. However, one did not need book learning as much as common horse sense to fit in to whatever problems arose in the town. Manual work was greatly prized and fulfilled, including work with forest trees in sawmills where trees were cut and turned into boards, planks, uprights for building homes, and so forth. All this was what the young men were prepared for, they could do, and so make a good living for themselves. I remember a sawmill being run in our woods. I understand that a sawmill could not return to an area where it had cut trees down until at least 20 years had elapsed between cuttings. This was to give the younger trees an opportunity to increase in size and new ones to grow. It also benefited the owner of the trees to receive more money for his timber. Before the farmer sold his trees, there always was a bargaining session as to how many trees would be cut and up to a specified size of the trunk of the tree. The sawmill owner went through the woods with the farmer and marked most of the trees which were to be cut. Of course, there was always a little subterfugery. Many undersized trees were cut. even though they weren't supposed to be cut. But then, I guess no one was really hurt, as that was a minimal transgression. And of course, there would always be a bargaining as to how much money the sawmill owner would pay the farmer. When the logs were first cut, a slab of bark was cut off. This slab could be used for building cabins and, of course, for wood burning in stoves. Some bark always remained on the main part of the log, even though that slab was cut off, and this bark had to be removed. Now, this job was good for the young boys, 14, 15, 16 years old, maybe even 13. Being farm boys, they could handle an axe real well, so they performed this task to earn themselves some money. This task was to chop off or skin off the bark that was left on the log after the slab was cut off. It wasn't much money, but it helped. It may have been 10 cents or 15 cents per log, or maybe less, I don't remember. At the end of the week, my older brothers earned themselves a few dollars apiece. They would work on Saturday or Sunday. It wasn't easy work, but it was there on our property, so who else would be more entitled to this earning? When the sawmill moved to another part of town or to another town, other boys took over from nearby. For a man to do this work, it wasn't enough pay, but I guess many men did it to earn the extra few dollars. There were piles and piles of sawdust with which we loved to play as when we were children. I imagine some of it was even sold or carted away by other people who needed it. I really don't remember my father utilizing any of it, even though it was left behind when the sawmill people moved away. I recall that, way after I had been teaching, that there was another sawmill group that had come in to cut the trees down in our woods, because I guess by that time the trees had grown. I mentioned some of the work that the boys could do even if they did not go on to high school. Now, some of the farms were handed down from fathers to sons. I know of some who had acquired an entire future in this way without having had advanced school education. Of course, some who did could improve their farming considerably. These days, in 1988, the farms which are still in existence in Salem, although very, very few, are really very modern, with modern equipment and educated help to run the business smoothly. It is a more expensive undertaking, but no more rewarding than it was when I was a little girl and everything done was plain and simple. In fact, I think that we appreciated the simple, sane, and plain existence more than many people do this complicated, sophisticated, technological world of today. Of course, we always had and will have competitions in all fields of endeavor. We had town fairs, county fairs, and state fairs to which neighbors and friends brought their best animals, their products, and ideas, hoping to be winners in their field, whether it be animals or preserving, baking, sewing, or whatever else they did excel in. The fairs were fun to go to. There was excitement, there was noise, there was renewing of relatives, relations, and friendships, as well as getting new ideas from others. Prizes were given. The Farm 4-H Club always was presented by a prize calf or a bull, as well as other things. children raised an animal from a baby, and these they showed, they took care of them, they brushed them and so forth. And then, of course, there were judges who judged the critters according to whatever specifications and requirements were needed. And how proud that boy or girl was to get a blue ribbon or even a red ribbon for their whatever they brought to the fair to be judged. There usually were these 2 ribbons. Then there were honorable mentions.